So our gospel this morning begins straight after the encounter on the journey from Jerusalem to Emmaus between two downcast disciples and the risen Jesus. Walking and talking together, three travellers explore all that the prophets and the scriptures have to say about the Messiah. But it's only when they get to their house and Jesus breaks bread over their supper table that the disciples recognise their new friend and who their teacher actually is. And as soon as they realise it, Jesus is gone. And so full of excitement and joy, the two remaining disciples race back to Jerusalem to tell their story and convince the other disciples that the rumours of resurrection are true. Jesus is alive. So here is where today's gospel begins. In a cramped room filled with people. A noisy room as voices are raised in argument and description and joy and disbelief. A stuffy room, quite possibly, with the doors and windows barred for fear of authorities. A room where the smell of cooked fish lingers. A room where there may not be much light, as by now it is dark. And into this place that, in my mind's eye, is crammed with bodies eating and drinking and talking, bodies that are hot and bothered, bodies that are anxious and achy, bodies that are tired, bodies that are wired, comes the body of Jesus. Not a ghost, not a spirit, a resurrected, living, breathing, eating, visible, audible, tangible body. Jesus' body. And as soon as they notice Jesus, it seems like everyone shrinks back as far as possible from him in fear. This is not what they had expected. This is not comfortable. It's weird and it's scary. And it's a body, not a ghost or a spirit. Jesus recognizes and understands their fear. He encourages them to uncover their eyes and draw nearer. Look at my hands and my feet. It is I myself. Touch me and see. A ghost does not have flesh and bones, as you see I have. And when he had said this, he showed them his hands and his feet. And probably conscious not only of the fact that his disciples aren't certain it's really him with them, but also that there's food available and his stomach's rumbling after leaving the meal at Emmaus prematurely, Jesus asks, "Do you have anything here to eat?" And I love how Jesus, who spent so much of his ministry around food, uses food to reassure his friends. And they gave him a piece of broiled fish, and he took it and ate it in their presence. Although somehow that last sentence doesn't sound as if they came up with a nice plate of food for him and budged along the table. More like they were sort of arm's length. There you go. Dropping it into his hand. Because no one in that room is very comfortable around this body, its uncanny ability to appear without warning, but a familiar capacity to eat and talk and speak and gesture. It's a body that's new and different, but it carries the scars of crucifixion. It gets hungry. It's a body that has suffered but is raised. It's a body that's both familiar and unfamiliar, continued and discontinued. It's fully alive, and yet it's somehow different. Jesus' body must have been very discomforting. I wonder how comfortable we are with our bodies. Because I'm not sure that Christians are very good at being comfortable with bodies. I'm not sure we always see them as the gift that they are. A gift that through which, like the risen Jesus, we engage with the world and the people around us in a myriad different ways. I think we find them a bit awkward. I think we find them awkward in spite of the fact that the God who loves us and gave us our bodies as a gift to interact, and in spite of the fact that God has a face and a body in Jesus. In spite of this, I think we are a bit unsure what to say and what to think and what to do about bodies. I was reading something by writer and theologian Paula Gooder, and she says Christians frequently see our bodies as something to be ignored or controlled rather than cherished or loved. And that made me feel rather sad. I think that post-COVID that might have shifted a little, because we had a long time where we'd remember how deeply sad and dissatisfying and often tragic it was when we couldn't be together in our physical bodies, when we couldn't hold someone's hands at times when our bodies felt strong but theirs was weak and suffering. I think perhaps the importance of being embodied did become clearer then, but I still feel there are ways in which we prefer our spirits to our bodies. I also think Christians have played a part in how people find bodies embarrassing and shameful. Just think of all those piano legs the Victorians covered up. And more seriously, think about the parts of our bodies that we don't like to talk about or name, and the problems that fear and taboos can lead to. Sometimes even the reluctance to speak to a doctor about parts that feel secret or even dirty. Jesus wasn't interested in bodies being shameful. Think of his response to the woman who was hemorrhaging, to the lepers, to people's mucky feet, to allowing women to anoint him with oil. I think we sometimes talk about faith as if it's all about soul and spirit and how we feel and how we think. But Jesus gave us a meal to remember him by, bread to chew, wine to taste and swallow. When we worship, we sing and we listen and we speak and we raise our hands or we kneel. And Paul uses the image of a body to describe how our different gifts complement each other. How can the eye say to the hand, I don't need you? Bodies are important to God. Bodies are used by God, and bodies are used for God. Now, I'm conscious as I move on in this sermon that I am in decent health, which isn't the case for everyone here. And I'm also aware that whilst I'd quite like to change some of the way I look, I'm contentedly resigned to my size and shape most of the time, which is also not the case for everyone here. And one day I'm more than likely to experience illness or disease or have mobility problems, and I don't know how I will feel about my body at that point. I may well have to do a lot of wrestling with God. I hope I will still see it as something worth looking after and something worth giving love to. Perhaps the ways in which our bodies and our relationships with them dominate our lives when we're ill is further proof of their value and their inextricable bind to who we are and how we see ourselves. In a tendency to see bodies as flawed or difficult or annoying or disabling, and they frequently are, do we forget that they are also frequently amazing, in spite of what we might be suffering and going through? That they persist in keeping us going, that our hearts will still beat, our eyes will still see, our hair will still look awesome, our legs will still hold us up even if we are in pain. How often do we celebrate that we are still keeping going, despite the problems we have? That we are somehow still made strong in our weakness, and that our bodies are remarkable that they can do that? Or do we restrict ourselves to seeing the brokenness and the need for healing and not the adaptations or the determination to keep going and pursue health and be comfortable in our own skin? I had a friend at college. He has, cerebral palsy. And he would lament how often when he went into churches, people would ask him, can I pray for your healing? And yes, absolutely, his body frustrated him. But it also made him laugh. It took him for walks. It gave him buckets of KFC to eat. And he was advocating for the rights of others whose bodies and minds need attending to in churches, at work, and in academia. He did things with his body. Jesus asked a blind man named Bartimaeus, what can I do for you? He didn't ask him, can I heal your eyes? And different though our bodies may be, Jesus gives them the same respect. Lastly, our bodies are important because we're going to be stuck with them for a long time. The New Testament descriptions of what resurrection is like seems to be that we will, like Christ, be raised in our body somehow. Certainly that's what we see in today's gospel. And that where Jesus is gone, we follow. So perhaps we need to be kinder to ourselves, our bodily selves. We need to enjoy having a body. Be grateful for all it can do for us. Use it to serve God and one another. Be pleased with the parts of it we like, and remember it was made for us uniquely by God. I think it's good to feel comfortable that the real me is not just the real me inside, but all of me. And remember that one day all of me will be raised and recognizable and real and restored in the resurrection. Amen.